God puts us in nations, in places, not by mistake, but to do a job. What if we opened our eyes to the needs of our colleagues, of our leaders, of our subordinates, and we were a priest on their behalf? Welcome to the Repurposing Business Podcast. My name is Brett Johnson.
And I'm Len Johnson.
And we're going to be talking about how to get our business into God's business. Our subtext is Let My Business Go, and we'll have guests from around the world. So thank you for joining us this week and every week on the Repurposing Business Podcast. My name is Brett Johnson, and I'm here with three special friends today who are going to introduce themselves to you because their backgrounds are so impressive. It's not that they don't need an introduction. It's going to be awesome as you get to know them. And we are going to start with Ziezi Dillon. Zienzi, where are you from? Where are you now? And tell us a bit about your background, particularly in the world of finance and capital.
Thank you, Brett, for inviting me to this amazing panel. I am Ziezi Dillon, Zimbabwean born, lots of experience on the continent, worked in South Africa. I have over 35 years banking experience. I started off in the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe when it used to be Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe. And then I transitioned from Reserve Bank, which is central banking. I went into retail banking and corporate and investment banking. So I've worked for Standard Bank in South Africa. I used to be head of treasury risk audits across all the 17 African countries. I also worked for a very interesting bank, which is UBank. It used to be Teba Bank. It's a bank that was founded by the mine workers. Mining in South Africa was really the backbone of the economy. Very interesting experience there. If I have time, I'll get to share more about it. I went there to set up their risk and governance division. They were almost on the verge of losing their banking license. And I had to go there to help put up the structures in place, which became an award-winning program, the most effective risk management across Southern Africa, which was very interesting. It was not because of me, but it was about all leadership and teamwork. I then transitioned to ABSA, which then changed to Barclays. I was head of, I started off as a chief risk officer for the services cluster, which had about 6,500 employees. I then moved to corporate and investment banking, where I went to set up the Africa division, which again was an interesting experience, covering all African countries, excluding South Africa. So that's, in a nutshell, my background. I have extensive board experience right from the time when I was in Zimbabwe, working, I was on the board for Grain Marketing Board, also Teleaccess. I moved to South Africa. I chaired the Public Service Commission, and also for about 3 years. I also chaired the Department of Public Enterprises, which is more of the shareholder government department, where all the state-owned enterprises were reporting into. So I chaired the audit committee for about 9 years. I worked with different ministers, going to parliament, which was another interesting experience. And then in 2017, I had to leave the bank because the Lord was saying, I need you to go and set up my kingdom finance system. So that's what I am doing here in New York. Interesting journey, interesting experience, getting to understand the pattern in terms of the kingdom banking system.
Great. So isn't that a wonderful background? Excited to have you with us, Zienzi.
Thank you.
And Zienzi and I met many years ago, actually in Silicon Valley. She had a group of people who were going around as part of some of the marketplace ministry she does, and I met her there at a hotel, and we've connected, and we've since traveled to Nigeria together. She's been a speaker, as has Dennis, her husband.
Wow.
And Zienzi has married an American, and he has an amazing work in New York City in that area. And so it's wonderful, Zienzi, to have you with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you,
And then
Brett.
just down the road from Zienzi, we have Susan, who is in Pennsylvania. Susan, tell us what you're up to.
Thank you. Thank you, Brett. Thank you for inviting me to this panel as well. It's so good to be with others who love Jesus. My name is Susan Oh. I'm the Investment Director of Risk Parity, Currency Hedging, and Strategic Implementation at PSERS. PSERS stands for Pennsylvania Public School Employees Retirement System. We are $58 billion pension plan servicing over 500,000 members, active and retired school teachers and school employees. We manage about 40% of our assets internally, and I've been part of that group and leading that group for last well over 20 years. I've been, so I started my career, I'm originally from South Korea, by the way. I came to the United States when I was 16 with my family, as my parents were seeking better opportunity for us and better education for us, and went to school for accounting, and I thought I'll be a CPA. My dad said, okay, you're good in math, study accounting, and your life will be set. But God had a different plan. So I started my career with KPMG, and after 4 years where I was also auditing and consulting PSERS, they offered me a position to run their investment accounting because I had my specialty in derivative accounting. And derivative is a very complex investment instrument, and they just didn't know how to account for it well. So we as an auditor were not giving them clean opinion unless they knew it. And they said, you're the only one in Harrisburg who knows anything about derivatives, so please come work. And I thought, I'll just come and work for maybe 2 years, but 2 years actually led to 25 years. And during that time, about 4 years later, I joined the investment accounting group. Director of Equity met with me to talk about one of the reports that my staff produced. And after about an hour of talking, next day he offered me the position to manage $300 million of international stock portfolio. So that planted a seed. And you know, since then I've been, that portfolio has grown to over $8 billion, and just did many other derivative strategies, risk balance, multi-asset strategies. So I've been running internal portfolio for good 20 years. I've been the chair of asset allocation committee, where we are trying to set the strategic asset allocation and set the framework. I was named as their first female director. Zienzi knows this very well, that investment management is even more male-dominated than computer science. It's one of the most male-dominated fields in our society. And even CFAs, there are 16% women CFAs, which is the highest distinction in investments. And of that 16%, only about mid-teens are women who's actually working in frontline instead of middle or back office. So, and I was the second female director in 100 years of history at PSERS. So I think things are definitely changing. The area that I'm responsible for currently is managing the currency hedging program for the plan. That's about $5 billion. And I manage my our multi-asset portfolio, which is about $2 billion, and just continue to really be interested in this ESG, environmental, social, and governance, where you are putting capital in the hands of those who are running their business with a high level of governance.
Great, fantastic.
Thank
Thanks, Susan. Thank you. Good, we've lost Zienzi, but I can sort of see her in the background, so I think she might come back on.
Yeah.
There she is.
is.
There she is. Back again.
Yeah.
Okay, Suparno, so, tell us about yourself. Suparno is an amazing man. When I think of Dr. Suparno, I think of Dr. Zhivago, the big Russian movie, but he's the Southeast Asian version of Dr. Zhivago, yeah. So Suparno has his finger in many, many pies, and as including some banking experience and lots of economics experience. So tell us about yourself, Suparno.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me here. I'm in the family business, but before that, let me just say that I became a believer about 43 years ago, back when I was a student in London. And since then, I've been experiencing the Lord's up and down in my Christian life, but He has always been faithful. And so, one of the things I discover is that I have a life verse, and it says from Isaiah 57, verse 14, build up, prepare the way, remove every obstacles from my people's way. And so, if I look at my life, since I've been back, I'm in the family business, and when I came back after doing my PhD, my father, in his wisdom, realized that this younger son of his, he's not a very structured person, and so basically he just told me, okay, you just do whatever you want. So because at that time, most of my brothers, all my brothers, they were already running, various divisions in the business. And so that was actually very good, because then I'm quite free to do business development. I'm quite free to look for values in the company. I'm quite free to take a few companies public. I'm quite free to do strategic planning and so forth. Yeah. So right now we are mainly in the mining business and agriculture, so natural resources. My wife and I, we run schools as well, all the way from preschools to grade 12, high schools. We also do training, and I was telling Brett, we just started a new startup, which is in the headhunting. So basically helping people to see their calling. So our vision is joy at work, because we realize that there are so many people who are not happy where they are, and also basically they need training, both technical as well as soft skills. And also we do business assessment so that people understand, how wonderfully God has made them, and also make in the image of God. So if you think about all the things that's happening, I basically met Brett in ministry when Rip was in Indonesia. I think, how long ago was that, Brett?
That was 2005. Yeah.
2005. Yeah. So about 15 years ago. Yeah. So besides Rip, I'm also involved with Crown. I sit on the board in the US. I'm also involved with Alpha, involved with as advisors in a few other ministries, as well as in some schools and foundation. Yeah. So basically, if you look at it, my life goal is effectively more as a road builder. Yeah. So for example, when Brett wants to come to Indonesia, so we managed to meet each other. So I help to build up, prepare the way, remove the obstacles from my people's way. And so that's what I've been doing with various ministries, and also, like the new startup as well. I'm building, I'm removing obstacles in my family business as well. We are basically just improving and removing obstacles, making things better. So that's my life calling.
Fantastic, great. Yeah, so when I grow up, I want to be like you three. Let's just get that on the table. And so, Suparno, a question for you. We're talking about this topic of capital and transformation. Now, a statistic I heard back in 2005 was that about 70% of the assets in Indonesia sat in the hands of Christians. And I don't know if it's still the case today. I mean, Indonesia is the most populous Muslim country in the world. But it's got also a lot of believers, and the believers are actively involved in business. Do you see the impact of that in the society? In other words, do you see believers using capital and their assets to make a difference in the society in Indonesia, and how's that worked?
I think increasingly so. I remember about 17 years ago when I first took up the as national representative for Crown. We were teaching people that everything belongs to the Lord, and many people actually do not understand that, including pastors. They were saying that, well, 10% belongs to Him. I can do whatever I want with my 90%. Yeah, and so we're glad, like Rip, Brett Johnson, you guys came and you guys also helped to transform, I think, about 81 companies. And since then, we've been seeing more and more people understanding biblical values. There are actually quite a lot of marketplace ministries happening in Indonesia right now as well. The disappointing things is there's still a dichotomy. Many people, they believe that the money is supposed to be generating the best returns, and so how it generates the return, whether through integrity, whether through various other things, that's not that important. And so we still have a long way to go. About 20 years ago, we were almost at the bottom in the Transparency International. We were like number 5 or so. Yeah. And so when we first started going up, people say, "Oh, you guys must have bribed the people who are doing the ranking, because Indonesia is not going up." But I'm glad to say that things are changing, things are improving, and I'm also seeing that there are many Christians who are saying that they need to be the salt and light, and they need to transform their society. And also, I've done a little bit of research since Brett invited me to talk about capital. So I've asked a few people, and it's actually quite interesting how people's mindset is changing. Although there's still this gaps, and many times you see somebody, they are believers, but when you look at their business ethics and the way they conduct business, you probably you may say, let's not proclaim that they are believers.
Yeah, very interesting. And Suparno, you went through actually one of your family businesses way back was a bank, right? And then you went through the Asian banking crisis, and yet you had to clean up all of that stuff. So you actually got your fingers into the banking world for a while, right?
Yes. So during the Asian economic crisis, I think the top 10 banks in Indonesia, they all collapsed. The only one that survived was the one that's rescued by the government. They haven't got the phrase that says too big to fail yet, but those who survive, probably they have certain contacts, connection, and so they were rescued. So we own a bank. We were actually doing quite prudent banking, but when the economic hits, the crisis hits, the interest rate went from 15% to about 100%. So if you lend somebody in rupiah, the interest rate is 100%. But if you lend somebody in US dollars, then the rupiah went from 2,400 to about 15,000. So whoever borrows money at the time, nobody can return them. So as a result, the bank too collapsed, and so we restructured that, and actually about the last 15 years we haven't have any debt. So we are basically trying to operate our business debt free.
Fantastic. What a great thing. So Zienzi, in Africa, talk to me a bit about what you've seen, the connection between capital and transformation. We know that trillions of dollars have poured into Africa. Has it ended up transforming countries for good? Where has it worked well? Where has it not worked? And what have you seen in terms of the connection between capital and transformation?
Wow, that's an interesting question. But let me just start by saying, I want to respond to what you said, that when you grow up, you want to become like us. But I think we are stepping on your shoulders. You have done well. You are a father. And you are raising leaders. That's what you are doing. So I just want to honor you and to honor my brother and sister that we are connected on this dialogue. So the connection between capital and transformation, I believe the capital that has been going into Africa has not been for the people on the bottom of the pyramid, so to say, or the indigenous people. The capital has been going specifically for interests outside. It goes in and it goes out. The capital has been going in to extract and in certain instances to exploit. Right. So that has really left Africa in a big hole. I can give you an example of the Queen of England. She has Cullinan diamond on her tiara and on her scepter. But the people in Cullinan in South Africa, they are poor. They don't have anything. But the diamonds were taken out. Right. So it's about all those issues. Capital, was it good capital? Was it meant for the people? Was it meant for the countries? We haven't really seen that in a very substantive way. So there is more that needs to be done in terms of Africa actually mobilizing its own capital. Here I'm talking about domestic resource mobilization. How do we start working with what is in our hands? The international capital that has been coming through, it has been coming through in different shapes and forms. Some of it has been coming through even the stock exchange, well and good, to go and invest in different companies. But those companies, are they really, are they really for, for the local communities? Good example would be where, the banking sector. When I was working for Barclays, there was such a huge focus on the community. If whatever we are doing, if it doesn't really benefit the local people, probably it's the wrong thing that we are doing. Right. So there was some impact, but not substantive impact. So how do we start mobilizing our own capital? Africa has got resources, it has got land. 65% of arable land globally is found in Africa, right? And the land, we go back to Genesis chapter 1, have dominion over the fish of the sea, have dominion over the land, So it's not about dominating people, it's about the resources that God has given us. How do we start mobilizing funding around that? Now, when you also talk about capital, I also have a different view as well, in the sense that we've seen startups coming up. A good example is, the CEO of JP Morgan, Diamond. The first year when the startups started coming up, he said, they are coming. Who are they? Startups. The second year, he went back to the shareholders. They are going to eat our lunch. Who are they? The startups. So I believe the atmosphere has been charged up for us believers, right, to take dominion in the marketplace. So it's not about what you have in your pocket. It's about what do you have that attracts capital. And God is really highlighting a lot, especially these days, to me about having the pattern. the pattern is very important. The same way God gave the pattern to Joseph, he gave the pattern to Bezalel, to Moses, and the craftsmen were raised. So that's really where we are going. I'm strongly believing that it's really about when you have the pattern. And the pattern, I'm not going to get it from anybody else. It's in the presence of God. So it's about the presence of God, the pattern. The pattern will come with the plan, the implementation plan, the people, the process, and then the patent as well, because whatever you get, it has to be protected. And then the people linked to that. So which now takes us to your business model. What is your business model? How does it look like? How are you going to deliver? So once you have that, capital is there. I always say Africa has got no shortage of capital. It's shortage of bankable projects. And that hasn't changed. So the bankable projects, I believe, God is ready. He's just looking for, who shall I send?
Okay, fantastic. I love your, you go, Suparno, yeah.
I just jump in with a short story. Talking about land, we were talking to a pastor in the big island of Kalimantan. And so he was just telling us, he's been praying that God will give him a motorbike. But then nothing happens. So basically one of our people then told him, hey, you look around you. God has already given you all these resources. So we encourage him to cultivate the land and as well as to dig a well and rear some fishes. And so after 3-4 months, he was able to buy himself a motorbike because he's able to cultivate the land. And then after that, then this guy is a very generous person. He wanted then to help his other pastors by giving them motorbike. But then we told him, no, you shouldn't do that. What you should do is you should tell them to look around to see what they have, and then encourage them to do the same thing as you. Yeah, and so as a result, actually, we are seeing that part of Kalimantan, people are making good use of their land. And so it's becoming a small oasis. Yeah. So I agree with what our sister Zienzi said. There's actually resources, sufficient resources.
Yeah. And I love the idea of, there's a big dependence on the West. If we can get something from Europe, we can get something from the US, waiting for them. There's a wonderful guy I think he's in Uganda, Bishop Hannington, after they'd been through domestic civil unrest, villages were flattened, people were in orphanages, and he challenged his people, saying to them, what do you have in your hands? Right. Let's not wait for the West. And they began with little things. One lady had one chicken, and she was a crippled lady, and somebody else had something else. They collected blankets for them. Just a lovely story.
Maybe just to add on to that, if you don't mind, just taking it back to Africa, talking about the land, the resources are under the soil. So as long as there are proven reserves, you can come up with a structure where you can actually securitize what is underground and issue paper and raise funding. So it's really about looking now beyond the ordinary. It's about innovative financing solutions that we need to start getting into. Africa is so loaded with resources. It's just about how do we start harnessing in a structured way, but also in a secure way to make sure that money doesn't just find its way through the window and never come back to the people.
Yeah. I think that's really, really important, Zienzi. And because God is God and He is good, He places, I believe, in every country the resources needed to bless that country.
Yes.
And we have to look at what's there. But I love your idea also, because I think in Africa and in other parts of sort of the developing nations, we're facing a new wave of colonization, but it's asset colonization. It's not the political colonization. People are too smart to go and plant a French flag or a Belgian flag in the middle of Africa. They don't want to do that. but they will go in and steal the assets if they can, or misappropriate the assets. And so we need structures from believers that will prevent that asset colonization, because those assets are for the blessing of the people who are there.
Yes.
Zienzi, I loved your thing about the fact that at Barclays you said that there had to be a social component. And in my research, when I was writing the Repurposing Capital book, I found that Barclays Bank was founded by 4 Quakers. And that the original purpose of Barclays was to provide capital for believers who were in business. That was the original purpose. And the only way that surfaced, I don't see Barclays putting that on a flag, but Barclays was accused of being involved in the slave trading, and because there was a guy by the name of David Barclay was a slave trader. And very quickly the legal department came out and said, no. We were providing capital for Christians. This David Barclay was another guy, wasn't part of Barclays Bank. Yeah. So it's interesting to see that history. Yeah. Okay, so Susan, in the US, where do you see the push and the pull on using capital for companies that are doing more than just going after the bottom line, more than just maximizing the cash or the profit returns? Have you seen any good examples of that?
I think there is a huge movement now. Even Larry Fink, who is the CEO of BlackRock, who is, Zienzi knows this well, the biggest asset manager in the world is coming with the encouragement to do ESG. So environmental, social...
just explain ESG for a moment.
Sure. So environmental, social, and governance investing, ESG, is really a focus on an investment process. There are many different variations of this, and early on ESG was more of a divestment. Do not invest in tobacco stocks or firearm stocks. And it started with that principle. So it has this more of a stigma that, it limits opportunity set. And that's how some investors think. But it has moved on from that divestment model to now, let's reward companies that are purpose-driven. Let's reward companies who are not just looking at the bottom line, but they are long-term thinkers. They're the one who is thinking about how to manage human capital in an intentional way, also natural resources capital, that they don't just go into Africa and mine whatever that they want to get and leave the land different than how they found it, So they think about natural resource capital management as well as the social capital, where how are the companies managing their stakeholders' relationships? Not just maximizing shareholders' capital, but how are they managing the relationship with their customers, employees, and supply chain, and so on. So it's really a call for holistic investing rather than just looking at the bottom line alone. And I think this movement, which has really rapidly accelerated last few years, and more so even after COVID, because the social has been really highlighted. Last few years has been more on climate change. We need to move money towards climate change, renewable energy driven type of companies, so that, the overall there will be a better environment for people. But I think it has, for me, ESG is really all about G. And if you think about all the companies who are existing today, let's say 100 plus years, like my company, mine is government, so it would have existed regardless. But companies which have existed 100 plus years are the one who address the needs of the society, the pain points of the society, and they have managed it well to sustain themselves to this time. And they would have morphed their business model as the society changed. And we're saying we need to revise and upgrade our investment process to not just look at the financial capital and look at fundamental, the quant factors, but let's look at what is the character of the companies and countries. How are they managing their business? And that is very important in terms of evaluating the sustainability of that business and the outcome of return. So we think it's a very good risk mitigator to avoid the companies who get involved with controversies. Like, look at what happened to Wirecard in Germany. I mean, you can name so many companies that it just went from billions of dollars, $45-50 billion, to worth absolutely nothing overnight, over a few weeks. So we want to avoid those companies by aligning our process to not just sit behind the computer and analyze numbers, but really look at these qualitative factors. So that's what ESG investing is. And there has been a huge shift in acceptance. I would say more in Europe and more in Australia, that it's more commonly practiced by institutional investors, less so by US institutional investors so far. So it's something that I'm really starting to bring light to our pension fund community, because we as a pension fund, US pension fund, as a sector, we manage about $4 trillion. And if we can change our investment process, we upgrade it to more holistic process, we can really bring about change. How do we do it? With quantitative matrix, and how do we set standards? How do you identify one company over the other in terms of their governance score? And that has been the challenge. But I think there is also still a buy-in that still needs to take place, because I'm still not quite there with my board, because their focus is, what if we don't make 7.25% that we are supposed to make? And I said, if we think it an old way, new normal is here, new era is here, and if we think that we can reap that 7.25 doing old way, forget about it, because the new era is here, and we need to think about what is sustainable, what is long-term, what are the businesses that it's addressing those pain points, and that's going to have that tailwind. The ones that it has worked in the past is not going to work the same way, but it has been a challenge to bring that fear under control, because people think that once we do something good for the world, wow, are we going to lose money? Because in the past, the social investing has generated subpar return. I think there were a lot of people with great passion, but they didn't know how to execute. And when you don't have the combination of the heart and execution, it may not result in good return. And I think we need to break some of those,
So one day, Suparno, do you think, I remember I'd left Jakarta, I was on my way back to the Bay Area, I went through Hong Kong airport, I picked up a book called Spiritual Capital. It was actually, I bought it, it wasn't written by believers, it was just written by regular guys, but they talked about companies having spiritual capital. This was many, many years ago. Do you think two questions. One is, there seems to be, like in Africa or other countries, the more you've got financial capital, the less you have spiritual capital. There's been an inverse relationship. In other words, capital always carries an agenda, and capital sometimes, big capital, often corrupts. But I hear you guys talking a bit about spiritual capital. Do you think we'll ever learn to measure that, value that, and what will that look like? And what's your hope for the relationship between financial capital and spiritual capital? So there's about 3 questions, open to anyone.
I actually look at capital in a broad way. I've actually written a paper on human capital, financial capital, and natural capital, or natural resources. And I feel that the best is still human capital, because actually in our business, previously we were in the timber business, and so then the timber could be substituted, and and so forth. And we've seen like West Virginia compared to like Switzerland. Switzerland is one of the richest countries in the world. West Virginia is one of the poorest states in the US. So natural resources is not that important if you do not know how to manage it.
Yeah.
Likewise, financial resources, we've seen many people who strike the lottery and then 3 years later, they're back to bankruptcy. So actually, that's where my passion is right now, to build people, to help them realize, they're making the image of God, help them to reach their full potential, and to help them to also see, like you say, the spiritual capital. Because I think that's the only way we can encourage people. Otherwise, many times, if it's just like financials, when they achieve what their target, then they find that to be meaningless. And so having a spiritual capital becomes very, very important. And so I was actually reading something from the Harvard Business Review yesterday. They talk about emotion. Yeah, they say emotion is more important than customer satisfaction. And so people who believe in what you believe, they will remain as a satisfied customer. They will give you a lot of chances. They say, okay, he believes in the same thing. Yeah, let's give him some benefits of the doubt, even though your excellence may not still be that good. But I mean, obviously, over time, they will give up hope on you. But whereas customer satisfaction, the moment you do not satisfy them, they're gone. But if there's like emotional highs, people would stick with you. So I do believe that spiritual capital is very, very important.
Yeah.
Great.
Wow.
Zienzi,
Maybe,
thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it's a very interesting question. Spiritual capital, for me, it starts off with the vision that you have. Where did it come from? And how is your team buying into that vision? Do they really understand what they are all about? The word of God in Genesis chapter 1, it says we should have dominion, right? It talks about dominion, but it's all about serving God and serving man, right? And money is spiritual. If you look at the Illuminatis, the Freemasons, they are highly spiritual, those people, in the dark world, right? But we have to really, I think, upgrade ourselves or go up higher in terms of heightening that spiritual intelligence, spiritual capital. Because we cannot put a price tag on the spiritual capital because it's so unlimited. It's about us connecting with what God is doing, getting the team members to connect with what God is doing. I'm currently chairing the Cassava Smart Tech listed on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange. It's one of the top performing companies, founded by Econet through Strive Masiwa, who is a believer. He started that company from the word of God. And that, he has done so well. He's one of the billionaires in Africa. But when I chair the meetings, we start with a prayer, right? Start with a prayer. Everybody prays. We pray. And there are times when things are hard. We just have to say prayer. And there are times when even the founder of the company, when he started, when things were hard, it was nil by mouth, fasting and praying. So for me, it is so enriching. And of course, the question would be, are we not imposing our belief system on others who are not believers? There are times where you have to do it covertly. There are times where you have to do it overtly. So it depends on what the Lord is doing and what the Lord is saying. But again, the vision should be about what the Lord is saying. How do we execute this strategy? Lord, leaders would have imagined that one day we'll have Uber. Nobody. But I strongly believe whoever the founder of Uber is, they tapped into a certain space that is beyond just the natural. Right. And I strongly believe that even our strategies, it's not about what's happening in the market. It's about what is God doing. Jesus said, I am doing what my Father is doing. I am saying what he is saying. The same thing should be with us when we are running businesses. What is the Lord saying in terms of the investment strategy? How should be even the investment, target, be, and all that. So and I strongly believe that as leaders, we are positioned in a way to disciple nations. They may not be knowing the same way God raised Joseph. I think it's the same way that God is doing, and the new normal that my sister mentioned. And there is a new normal. It has never. No one has ever been this way before. Great opportunity to bring in what God is saying. So, Lord, what are you saying? How are we going to do banking? How are we going to do investments? Something that has never been done, that has never been seen. So it's really about just opening to what he is saying. So that's spiritual capital for me. The government is upon his shoulders. And God is saying, who shall I send? The harvest is ripe. The laborers are few. So it's about being sent to the marketplace. It's about representing him in the marketplace. And without, imposing ourselves, but leading by the Spirit of God.
Wonderful.
I would add that one of the biggest lies that I believed is that investing is neutral. I'm just going after X return.
Right.
And when you think that investing is neutral, when you say spiritual capital, every transaction actually has some kind of agenda attached to it.
Right.
And that capital is being invested either for good purpose or it's in the hands of bad purpose or in bad hands. And when you don't realize capital can actually have positive and negative impact, and it's going to one of those two hands. And when you realize it's either or, not neutral, I think that's when you start to think about, wow, there is an impact that we're going to make when we're moving $58 billion and investing in a certain way. But the lie that I think a lot of people who are investing believe is, oh, we're just going after returns. There's no agenda. I don't have any agenda. I'm just looking for the best X return. And I think that's the biggest lie. And when spiritually, when you're awakened to realize you're either making positive or negative impact with any investments, every dime of investments that you are making, now you want to be intentional about shifting to what is good for the society and how do you define that good. You're right. And actually that's what has happened during this COVID time. No one has even imagined this to take place. And I think when you are in time of wide range of uncertainty, it's not even a time of uncertainty. The range of uncertainty is so wide that it can skyrocket or it can totally go the other way. When you have this wide range, it is more important than ever before to be anchored in what he said, because we know what he said is always true, regardless of whether it's time of certainty or uncertainty. So,
yeah, maybe just to say a few words there. There is a huge focus on profit with purpose. So you are making profits, but these profits have got a purpose. They are being derived from purpose-driven, maybe investments or business initiatives, but there is a purpose. So it's not just about making money for me to be enriched, but how do we make money that will reach out even to the community?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, great. It's been wonderful having the conversation. We could keep going for hours, but we won't. And I appreciate what each of you has shared. And it certainly is such a wonderful time in history with challenges, but huge opportunities. I know when we began talking about purpose being a big deal in companies 24, 25 years ago, people didn't buy it, but now it's an everyday thing. Capital having an agenda, it's more and more understood, and it's up to us as God's people whether we harness that for good or we just pretend that it's neutral, as you say, Susan, which it isn't, never is. And then Suparno, I love what you shared about, and I know you've got many stories about looking what you have in your hands. I remember your whole story with the palm oil plantation, which is an amazing story, which maybe you'll end with that story. And then Zienzi, just seeing that there is capital, that people, we don't have to have a poverty mindset. This week I was just blogging about something, I put it out today. I was reading in Hebrews. It's very interesting that it says that Jesus is the heir of everything, and he made everything. It goes on to say at the end of verse 3, he created everything. Hold on. He inherited what he created. And what we love to do is to say, I want to inherit what Suparno created. I want to inherit what Mugabe created, or what, the government created, or whatever. But in the kingdom of God, you actually inherit what you co-create with God and what you steward with him. It becomes part of our present and our eternal inheritance. And I love the way that, Zienzi, your emphasis on mobilizing indigenous capital, believing God has placed it there in the nations, and not just hoping for a handout from the World Bank or whatever it might be. So I love that emphasis. And so, Suparno, do you want to end with your palm oil story?
I would probably tell you another. And actually, I like your idea about the global giant trust, and I've been thinking about it. Like right now, I'm 60 years old. If I were to invest individually, probably the impact will not be that big. But if we could have people, what we call organized capital, it's similar to organized crime, but organized capital, I think the impact would be a lot bigger, and the duration would go on, for another few hundred years and so forth. And then getting people to come together would also, that you'll be able to close the gap, which I think is very important. And actually, I'm quite encouraged that I've attended various conferences throughout in the year. I go to the Christian Economic Forum, and they talk quite a bit about that too. And I also attend the faith-driven investor, Henry Kastner and so forth. They also thinking along how to make an impact. And I think this is so important, because even though we talk about God owns 100, owns everything 100%, but many times we just think in terms of money. What do I do with the money? But when we are investing capital, we are still thinking about maximizing the capital, in terms of ROI. But we don't really think so much in terms of the social impact. How do we derive a flourishing society? And so I think a lot more thoughts needs to put into that. And I'm glad, Brett, that you are in the forefront, of thinking through some of these things, which is. I believe more and more people are thinking about it, which is very, very important.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, Suparno, today I was thinking about the Global Giants Trust, or Global Giants Foundation, and thinking, I have set it up. I've set it up. I've set up the entity with an investment holding company underneath that. But I thought to myself, I need to just step back and let guys like you run the thing. I'm sure that's and others run with it, go with it, because there's people better qualified than me to run that sort of thing. So we should put our heads together after this call and see what we can do next. So blessings to each of you. Thank you so much. You're also special in your own way. And thank you so much. And God bless you for the work that you're doing in your different fields.